You are watching Breakthrough News, and this is the Freedom Side. Welcome, everybody. I am one of your co-hosts, Eugene Puryear, here as always, alongside my intrepid co-host, Rania Khalek. Rania, as always, great to be back alongside you.
It is always great to be back alongside you, Eugene. We have a great show today, as we always do, but, each week it gets better. So.
Yes, each week it always does get better. Also want to give a big shout out to everybody who is watching us on Free Speech TV. And as always, big shout out to the FSTV team for making it possible for us to come directly to you on their platform as well. As Rania points out, we've got a great show for you here today in a range of different ways. So this would be an excellent opportunity for you to take the time before we get too deep into the show to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, then hit the bell so that you can get the alerts for the things that you have subscribed to so that all of our excellent content from Breakthrough News, including Dispatches with Rania Khalek, can be delivered to you, so to speak, very quickly, and you won't have to do a lot to actually look for it or find it. It'll just be mainlined right to you there. So just wanted to remind folks who are watching on YouTube about that. Rania, are there other things you would like to tell our viewers?
I can think of a few.
Okay.
I want to remind everybody that we are an independent media outlet who is able to grow and sustain ourselves with your support. We are not CNN. We are not the New York Times. We don't have big corporate funders. And that's why we're able to tell the truth on this outlet. But in order for us to keep going, we do need as much support as possible. So if you are able to, please consider becoming a member of Breakthrough News for as little as $5 a month. You can do that by going to patreon.com/breakthrough news, where you can, if you become a member, access exclusive content as well as exclusive merch. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to reach over because my mug's a little further than usual today. Here we go. So these are two sides of the same mug, you guys.
Yep.
Very cool. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. That's one of many pieces of exclusive merch you can access. But most importantly, at a time when the media, corporate media, just constantly lies because it's completely folded into the U.S. war machine and supports every imperialist venture around the world, including the genocide in Gaza, it is more important than ever to support independent media. So I highly encourage anybody who's watching and who is able to become a member. You can also donate. If you want to do a one-time donation, you can do it in the live chat on YouTube, or you can go to breakthroughnews.org and donate there.
Yes, you certainly can, and want to have a big shout out, by the way, to everyone who has already become a patron. Your patronage is greatly, greatly appreciated, and really we wouldn't be able to do any of it without you. So big shout out to you. Of course, everyone who's donated in the show chat over the years. Many of you I know donate on a regular basis. Big shout out to you as well, and certainly all of our other followers. We know it's tough times. Not everyone can contribute, but certainly just by watching, by sharing, by letting people know about Breakthrough News, you too are also making a big difference, as it were. So, patreon.com/breakthrough news. Hit subscribe on YouTube if you're watching there. Hit the bell so you get the alerts for the things that you have subscribed to. And of course, since we're about to start the show, this would be a great time for you to let people know that we are here. Things are happening. However you want to do that, air horn, car horn, knocking on someone's door, sending them a text. We're here, youtube.com/breakthrough news with the Freedom Side. And as always, we've got great stuff for you, and we want to get ready to just jump right into it, Rania. And we want to start here with some very interesting activities in the country of Turkey, where a U.S. naval ship was greeted by quite a bit of protest when it was docked there in the port city of Izmir. And we are very honored to be joined as we continue this conversation about all of that by Murat Akkad, who is a member of the Party Council of the Communist Party of Turkey. Murat, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Eugene. It's great to be with you here.
Well, it's an honor to have you here with us. And your party, Communist Party of Turkey, TKP, led what seemed to me at least to be a large demonstration in Izmir against the USS Wasp, which had docked there as part of, I think some broader military exercises. But tell us why you all felt the need to take to the streets and to the ports on this issue.
Okay, this issue has several dimensions. First of all, it's a symbolic visit, and it's symbolic in different senses. Of course, the protest was against the imperialist involvement in Palestine, in the genocide in Palestine, because this ship was sent to the Eastern Mediterranean in order to protect Israel. It was one of those ships. That is also symbolic. Why has this ship been visiting Turkey and not any other one? And another fact that two Turkish battleships were involved in a military exercise in the Eastern Mediterranean recently, last week, along with ships from other NATO countries, including USS Wasp. Later, the Ministry of Defense has said that when it was protested, this military exercise, they said that this wasn't a military exercise, actually. It was the so-called transition training. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. This fleet, these ships are there to protect Israel, and Turkey is involved, and that is the issue. This was one of the dimensions, which was symbolic. And of course, there's another dimension, which is more important in Turkey for us. One of the ships that were involved in this military exercise was named Anadolu, a Turkish battleship. And this is a symbolic battleship also. It was declared as the symbol of Turkey's defiance against the US and the Western powers in general. And this ship had arrived in Izmir, the port of Izmir, exactly 1 year ago. And on the same day, 1 year later, the USS Wasp has visited the port of Izmir. This USS Wasp is a very similar ship to the one I mentioned, Anadolu, the Turkish ship. They're both amphibian assault ships. And we think that this is clearly a message from the United States to the people of Turkey and Turkey in general. It's clear that the government, the Turkish government, is accepting this, has accepted this message, and is supporting this process. So we try to reflect the anger of the Turkish people who have been deceived in that sense, continuously deceived. Because behind all these, there's a bargaining process going on. The government, the Turkish government, is bargaining with the USA and the Western powers, and they will eventually come to an agreement. Maybe the ship, the USS Wasp, was sent to Turkey in order to celebrate this agreement. Maybe an agreement has already been reached. We will see that when it is disclosed. Well, we have been protesting battleships, US battleships. In other examples, we have protested them in the past. This latest protest is in line with this tradition, but this time we protested the symbol of the rapprochement between Turkey and the USA, between Turkey and NATO. I think this is important. Mm-hmm. And the government, the Turkish government, had developed a discourse that they call domestic and national. It was developed especially after the coup attempt in 2016. And we all know that at least a part of the US establishment was involved in this coup attempt. So, but we know that this discourse has many contradictions. First of all kinds of relations with the multinational monopolies continued, and Turkey has continued to become a loyal member of NATO. Under these circumstances, this so-called domestic and national discourse did not work. And recently we see that it is regressing. The government is closer to the US line and taking a more pro-NATO position. And behind our protest, the main reason was to protest this latest development.
You know, I'm curious, since October, since this genocide in Gaza had begun, how has that impacted politics in Turkey, both on the ground level in terms of just organizing around various issues, as your party might do, as well as, has it shifted anything in the government?
Well, of course it has. And the government was not honest from the beginning. In appearance, they had a pro-Palestinian approach, a stance, But there were many contradictions. First of all, I think the most concrete issue was the trade that has been going on between Turkey and Israel. I can give you a few figures because I think they're important. Israel was an important trade partner for Turkey. In 2022, Israel was the 10th destination of Turkish exports. And Israel imported 65% of its oil from Azerbaijan via a pipeline in Turkey, imported 65% of its steel from Turkey, and 95% of its cement from Turkey. These are huge figures. And this trade continued for a while after October the 7th last year. And of course, we and other political forces also protested this. And the government had to take steps in order to decrease this pressure. But it took months. And finally, in the month of May this year, the government stopped all the trade between Israel and Turkey, in appearance, of course. And when we look at the official figures, this undisclosed by the Turkish Statistical Institute, we see that the trade between Turkey and Israel has gone down to zero level. But, of course, again, there are some question marks. The trade between Turkey and Palestine, on the other hand, increased by 1,275%. This is interesting because who's going to buy in Palestine the goods from Turkey? Not the people in Gaza. In the West Bank, we know the situation, and all the goods have to go through Israel customs, in order to reach West Bank, and this is not possible. Of course, the figures are low compared to the figures between Turkey and Israel, but still, it raises question marks.
Mm.
No, I think that's a very interesting statistic, I have to say there. And, it just sort of raises another question, and I think it alludes to something you were mentioning earlier, Murat, which is the integration of Turkey into NATO. And it feels like, in many ways, the fact that Turkey has held itself out as a potential partner in the post-war, situation in Gaza, working with the U.S. and others. And I just wanted you to speak a little bit about that, because I think the perception for Americans is that Turkey is really, kind of like pro-Russia or against the United States or all of these different sorts of pieces, as opposed to a, significant part of the broader NATO coalition.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to say that the Turkish government has developed the ability to make maneuvers in a broader area and to, it's not easy to use the word autonomous, but had developed the ability to act more autonomously. Because in the past, Turkey had been a loyal ally of the Western powers, the USA. But in recent years, especially in the last 8 years, as I said, they have developed this ability. But it's not only Turkey. When we look at the imperialist system, we see that other countries, because of the crisis of hegemony, which has started mainly in 2008, the US and Western powers have stumbled. And so other countries have developed these abilities to maneuver more autonomously. Turkey is one of them. And of course, this has affected the relations between Turkey and NATO and Turkey and the USA. But when they look at the future, they know that they have to take sides, because things are going to reach a point where maybe two sides will confront each other. So Turkey, the Turkish bourgeoisie feel the need to take sides. And I think now they're preparing for this moment.
And I want to bring it back to the issue of Gaza real quick, because I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about, the criticisms your party has. And I think a lot of people have, because, the Turkish officials are very rhetorically strong in how they talk about Palestine, but Turkey maintains this relationship with Israel. So I'm curious, what are the criticisms here when it comes to the Turkish government's complicity in what Israel's doing across Palestine?
Well, yes, of course, there are many people who are protesting this fact. For example, when we started the protests against the USS Wasp, when the ship visited Izmir, a lot of people on the street and in the social media, etc., and a lot of people from the more conservative parts of the society, Islamic parts of the society, I should say, they believe that they should also have been protesting. The government should also have been protesting the arrival of USS Wasp, but they didn't. So a lot of people see this as a hypocrisy. That's hypocrisy, and so now they can see who's honest, who's sincere about what's going on in Palestine, and who is not. I think this was an important issue, important fact that helped the people to see, at least a part of the society, to see what is exactly right to do and what the government should have done but did not do.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's an important question, and I guess it just raises a question in my mind of if you expect in the future. I mean, I know you all will continue to protest and raise these issues continually, but do you feel there's a possibility of a rising tide of anti-NATO, anti-collaborationist sort of feeling because of what people have seen here in terms of how things have played out with the relationship between the two countries, the U.S., Turkey, and its relationship to what's happening in the Middle East?
Yeah, that is our aim, and we're trying to explain to the Turkish people about what's really going on. And the party will be involved in a campaign, in an anti-NATO campaign, starting soon, in 2 weeks, even less than 2 weeks, actually. And yes, that is an important picture from the port of Izmir. Mm-hmm. And so we'll try to explain this to the people. It's going to be very important. Otherwise, the Turkish people will be deceived again, will be betrayed again. And they will be open to even bigger dangers, because a more general war or the war in Ukraine, the reflections of the war in Ukraine on Turkey, the reflections of a possible more general war in the Middle East on Turkey, and because of these, the Turkish people will be more unsecure in their own country. And we have to explain this to the people. To be a part of NATO, to be a member of NATO for Turkey, it doesn't bring any kind of security. On the contrary, it makes the Turkish people very insecure.
Mm-hmm. Well, Murat, we really appreciate you being willing to join us here on the show, and excellent to see and to hear all of the various different aspects of what's going on there, including the organizing of the TKP. Murat Akkad, member of the Party Council of the Communist Party of Turkey. Thanks so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do appreciate the honesty there. It's not always easy in certain places to be able to criticize the sitting government. I also, Eugene, want to just quickly note that we had a few people donate in the live chat.
Yeah.
Thank you to Jinkster, X, and Kirk. You guys rock. And I just want to remind everybody that you can make a one-time donation in the live chat. Also, super important, make sure you smash that like button, you guys.
Smash
it helps
that
the
like button.
God, I love that sound so much.
Wow.
Anyway, love to hear my own voice telling you to smash that like button. But seriously, smash that like button. It really does help boost us in the algorithm, because Eugene, whenever I watch YouTube, I could be watching, sometimes I watch like food videos, like of people making cakes and stuff, just like to distract myself from how horrible the world is. And still somehow, despite the fact that I don't follow it, CNN ends up in my feed. Like, it just automatically gets boosted. So you have to smash the like button so that the algorithm will be tricked into feeding us into people's feeds so that they don't get confused by CNN.
Okay, well, that's a worthy cause. So far be it from me to criticize that.
Eugene, have you smashed the like button?
I mean, right now, I'm not even logged into my
No,
account.
wow,
We're
wow,
doing
you
a lot.
didn't
We're
even
doing a
like the
live
stream.
show. What
You
I'm gonna be
guys,
out
you
here.
guys, wow. We definitely need the audience to like the stream because the host hasn't even done
Of
it.
course not, because I'm
Wow,
paying more attention to
wow,
delivering the show to them.
wow. Okay,
But
well, I
that being
get it.
said, you alluded to there in the end of our last segment the challenges people face speaking out against their government's complicity in the genocide in Gaza, among other things. And people maybe think about that as a lot of countries in the global south where free speech is an issue. But in the United Kingdom, there has been a concerted crackdown on those certainly those speaking out against the genocide in Gaza. And of course, it has a lot of different facets to it. So we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show by the musician and journalist Lowkey. Once again, Lowkey, thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Eugene and Rania. It's always great to join you on this show.
Well, it is great to have you. And, maybe just give us some framing here. I mean, we've seen that, or some people I'm sure have seen that the head of Palestine Action has been charged as a terrorist, I think, just for giving a speech. We've had a number of activists and journalists who have had devices seized, I think, at the border and also been held. I mean, this really seems that it's a major crackdown from Keir Starmer's government on those who are daring to speak out against the genocide in Gaza.
Well, what you have is a situation where currently there are 16 individuals across England and Scotland currently in jail linked to Palestine Action cases. 5 of them have been sentenced in Scotland, and we have 11 in jail in England, 11 of them actually on remand. Now, this is the product, the manifestation of an arrangement that Israel has sought with Britain across the last few decades. Britain's own security services have integrated massively with the Israelis on several levels. So, for instance, when the British police hack phones of their own citizens in this country, they use an Israeli intelligence company called Celebrite, which was founded by alumni of Unit 8200. That's the Signals Communications Military Intelligence Unit, which spies on Palestinians and uses the information that it gains from listening to their conversations as compromat to try and convert them into collaborators. In addition to that, there's even an Israeli company called Nice Systems, which has been able to insinuate itself into the relationship between the British police and the Crown Prosecution Service. So meaning when the police services, particularly in Leicester, for example, are communicating with the CPS about charging people for crimes, it goes through something called Nice Systems investigations. Now, Nice Systems was founded by 5 alumni of Unit 8200 and is also partly owned by Elbit Systems, the main target for Palestine Action in this country. So this is really a complete stain on any semblance of sovereignty in this country, that you have Israeli intelligence companies involved in the infrastructure of the legal process and even the way in which the state surveils its citizens. Now, you have to remember that across the last decade, Britain's trade with Israel has increased by 73%. And that's led to a point where you have 400 Israeli tech companies operating on British soil. And Israel has been elevated to a tier 1 cyber partner, which involves a plethora of other ways which Israel is working with the British security services. And even in the case of Palestine Action, we have found through freedom of information requests that the Israeli embassy has directly attempted to intervene in Palestine Action cases, lobbying the Crown Prosecution Services to even push further in their persecution of the organization. And this was documented by the Guardian newspaper. What we also know is that throughout this process, the the Israelis have been watching very closely through lobby groups which exist in this country. So, for example, you have a key figure within the Crown Prosecution Services by the name of Lionel Aidan. He is the chief Crown Prosecutor for London. Now, he has been lobbied by several key Israel lobby groups. Again, it's very likely that that is focused on the issue of Palestine action. So in addition to the case of Sarah Wilkinson, who of course was arrested as a journalist and was asked by British police for the location of her contacts in Gaza. Sarah Wilkinson is someone who also previously has been involved with Palestine action. She was arrested, Section 12 Terrorism Act support for a proscribed organization, allegedly. All of her electronic devices were seized. She was told that she cannot use any electronic items. Amazingly, even her TV. It's all there documented by her online for people to check out. And then the other cases, of course, Richard Medhurst on the same basis was arrested. And then, as you alluded to at the beginning of the segment, Richard Barnard, a co-founder of Palestine Action, has been charged under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act, allegedly support for a proscribed organization. So this escalation has a direct correlation to Britain's involvement in Israel's war on Gaza. And one of the most concerning aspects of asking Sarah Wilkinson for the location of contacts in Gaza is that Britain has flown its R1 shadow plane above Gaza throughout this genocide. And one of the specialities of that plane is target acquisition. So the concern is, were the British police seeking to obtain this information to aid Israel in targeting these people? We do not know.
You know, Lowkey, I think it's really interesting that this happened under the leadership of Keir Starmer, who's the head of the Labour Party. So I'm curious if you could put this into the context of the Labour Party's purge of any pro-Palestine elements. I mean, the fact that you have the leader of the Labour Party doing this, I think in and of itself is quite significant.
Well, so Keir Starmer came out of the CPS. He was the head of the CPS. And during his time, he blocked the prosecution of Tzipi Livni, the former Israeli justice minister, for whom arrest warrants were issued by judges in this country. But during his time at the CPS, the only foreign state attorney that he actually met with was the Israeli state attorney, Moshe Lador, who he accepted hospitality and gifts from while he was the head of the CPS. He then went on to purge the Labour Party of pro-Palestinian campaigners, supporters, and even Jeremy Corbyn himself. So it would make sense that once Starmer had positioned himself as Prime Minister of the company, he would externalize that purge. And actually, what Starmer represents is the merging together of the political and the security sphere, because Starmer has a well-proven track record as a servant of the British security state. And so when he enters this position as Prime Minister, you then have completely obliterated the hope of any political checks on the activities of the security state. And when you look at the campaign against Palestine Action, you know, I just want to send my salutations out to those 16 people currently languishing in prison. They are the best of us. They are the freest among us. We kiss their hands and wish we could be more like them. We wish we could be among them. And if you wouldn't mind, I would like to read some of the messages from the individuals linked to Palestine Action cases in jail right now. So to start with, I would like to mention Jordan Devlin, who is somebody that was arrested as part of the operation on the Filton research and manufacturing hub for Elbit Systems in Bristol. Now, allegedly, the operation cost the company over £1 million worth of damage. Now, when Jordan wrote to explain why he had taken part in this activity, he said the following: "I am taking action against Elbit because the risk of months in prison pales in comparison to the despair suffered from witnessing the horrors they facilitate. The sense of wrong and right is black and white in this instant, and I am honored to take this opportunity in crafting a world I want to live in, to destroy completely the blatant evils in society we've all been lulled into ignoring." There's so many others that I would love to name. For instance, Fatima Rajwani, 20-year-old university student who is currently in jail as part of the Filton operation. She sent the following message: "We reject the business of imperialist murder that Britain profits from. The slaughter of black and brown bodies that the British arms trade facilitates must end. The empire must crumble. We will pull it apart, brick by blood-soaked brick. Long live the resistance. Long live Palestine." And so people in this country may be under the illusion that this is a democratic society which allows freedom of expression and believes in the rule of law. What Palestine Action has shorn of its pretensions is that very notion. We are disabusing the public of that illusion. You have to remember that Britain is a signatory to the Arms Trade Treaty, which stipulates that before rubber stamping any export from this country, Britain must analyze if that arms export may be used for a violation of international humanitarian law. Now, Britain has just blocked 30 arms export licenses to Israel, and that is, in essence, a vindication of the years of work that Palestine Action has undertaken and the hundreds of operations that have been carried out against Israeli arms sites in this country. Palestine Action's activity has led to the cancelling of £280 million worth of contracts with Elbit Systems by the British Ministry of Defence. It has led to the selling of 2 subsidiaries of Elbit Systems in this country at a loss: Ferranti Technologies in Oldham and Elite KL in Tamworth. And in addition to that, it has led to the shutting down permanently of Elbit's headquarters in London. All of this is a response to that groundswell of a movement. Palestine Action is an exception within the Western world, but it is not an organization, it is a tactic. That tactic has now been exported to multiple countries across the world, and it is a punch back against the abstraction of politics. Protests, in essence, which gather outside governmental buildings, are abstractions of politics. They are based on the idea that a group of people agreeing with the state, where they will stand outside a building in which political decisions are made, will affect the decisions made inside that building. Well, Palestine Action has established clarity. If you build these contraptions in our communities, you should expect us.
Well, it certainly has captured, I think, the attention of people all around the globe. And let me just ask you this before we let you go. If there are people who have maybe just heard this for the first time in terms of those being held as political prisoners for having solidarity with the Palestinian people, where should they go to learn more and perhaps offer their support if they so choose?
They should, of course, look for Palestine Action on social media. They should research, most importantly. You have to understand that Palestine Action is a result of Oslo being exported into the activism movement in the West. The idea that lobbying governments on the basis of international law was all that could be done. Palestine Action answered that and made clear that you will turn a country like Britain into another front where Israel has to defend itself. And that is what has been established here. And it will not go away, regardless of any prescribing that takes place and regardless of how many people you in prison. Palestine Action is a channel of that energy.
Well, as always, Lowkey, we really appreciate you coming on, helping us sort through all of this and giving us some critical and important information. As always, thanks for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you.
Rania?
I mean, it's just utterly stunning to see this kind of behavior from a country that purports to be the pinnacle of, civilized or civilization. And I mean, it's something that you're seeing replicated in many Western countries in various ways. But this might be the most extreme example now. But we have so many examples in the US, Eugene, of people, non-Americans and Americans, coming in and going through secondary screening in the US for their political activity over Palestine. So this is becoming a very central part of what the national security state across Western countries is using to basically crush dissent, because obviously we know Palestine isn't just about Palestine, right? It's about so much more.
No, agreed. Very, very relevant points, and some of it very tied into, where we want to go next here on the show, and that is, the attempts by the mainstream media in the United States, of course, by the U.S. government, often working hand in glove to raise the specter that, just about anything it seems that's happening is somehow tied to foreign meddling in elections or, different networks of people. Anyway, long story short, to get more into all of these points right now is Dr. Ben Becker, the editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News. As always, Dr. Becker, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's been quite a week just this week, forget the past month, of, major stories in the New York Times about Iranian disinformation, DOJ indictments of Russian media companies that are alleging that, various influencers are, unwittingly working for Russia or whatever it may be, allegations in major newspapers about, secret networks of Chinese government thugs that are allegedly nested within the Chinese American community. A real hornet's nest, it seems. And I think a lot of people may be wondering, in good faith, Ben, is should they be concerned that they are being manipulated online, in the streets, and elsewhere by, malignant forces?
Yeah, they should be concerned they're being manipulated by malignant forces. Who those malignant forces are and the scale to which they operate is the real question. For instance, you have currently $500 million is going to be spent between Labor Day and Election Day on campaign advertising by the Democrats and the Republicans. Of course, it's perfectly legal to collect tens of millions of dollars from shadowy sources and spend it on manipulating the hearts and minds and feelings of the American people. And we have social media companies that have hidden algorithms that decide what will be boosted, what will be shadow banned. So there's a lot of manipulation and malignant actors to go around, to be sure. But I do think it's quite interesting, quite coincidental and strange that the very first days after Labor Day, when the official sort of general election period begins, the conventions are over, they're sort of in the sprint the last 2 months from Labor Day to Election Day, that all of these DOJ investigations and Washington Post investigations and New York Times investigations all came out in the same week. Isn't that amazing? After some of them took 6 months, some of them took a year, some of them took 9 months, and they all came out in the same week. It's almost as if there is a attempt to build a pre-election narrative to scare the bejesus out of everybody, that anybody who's thinking independent thoughts or critical thoughts may be the unwitting dupes of one of the adversaries of the U.S. government. Clearly, this is something, it's almost become tiresome. It has become tiresome at this point. People are, I think, used to it now for the last few election cycles. And it was obviously spun up for this one as a new sort of narrative that both candidates can use against the other. Both can say, well, Iran favors Kamala Harris, so now Trump's going to focus on that. And Kamala Harris can say that Russia favors Trump, and then she can focus on that. Both can sort of scapegoat this or that foreign adversary. Both can rely on their sycophants and loyal stenographers and this or that sort of media ecosystem to boost it. And so they both get talking points that allow people to think about the foreign enemy instead of the real problems at home and the enemies who we can easily name and number right down the street from us, for instance, on Wall Street. So I think that's the big picture when you step back from it, is that, it's not coincidental all of this is coming out right now. And then when you start to drill down into the stories themselves, just like in 2016, just like in 2020, the evidence is very thin. The evidence that does exist is often exaggerated, way beyond proportion. There's a lot of use of passive language. There's a lot of use of sensational headlines that don't match what's actually in the article. There's so many problems with a lot of these articles. I don't know, of course, what every government in the world is doing in the United States. I assume there is a level of influence operations that happens in the whole world. I know the US does it. They have whole named agencies that are focused on influence operations. And I know that other governments that have them too. And I assume that the US would be an interesting place where you'd want to have influence. So I don't doubt that there are influence operations at some level, but the question is, why is it being ginned up right now? How is it being exaggerated, and to what end? I think those are really the big questions that everyone should be asking when they're seeing this. Is why is this being put in front of my face and in this way at this moment?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, not even speaking about just foreign meddling, though we could talk about some of that. I mean, you mentioned earlier all of the money that's being spent on these elections. And by sitting here focusing on some website or some meme that we're supposed to believe like Russia used to get you to vote for this person, or China or Iran used to get you to vote for that person, it distracts from the fact that we have a political system that is completely funded by various ruling class interests, whether it's, whether it's a weapons company, or whether it's the Israel lobby, which is totally tied into the military industrial complex. And I saw many people making the point that you have AIPAC promising to spend $100 million on this election. That's a lot of money. And they're saying it. Right. But then you've also got, various oil companies. And I mean, could you talk a little bit about the irony here, Ben, when it comes to what actually rules who we even get to vote for in the first place? Because there is a lot of funding and a lot of influence peddling happening there, but it's not coming from foreign adversaries necessarily.
Yeah, it's considered legal bribery. I mean, that's really what the lobbying industry really is. There's been the Princeton study quite famously established that, what the American public believes on this or that issue has almost zero bearing on whether legislation passes to that effect. Zero bearing, meaning if you have, but what does matter is the approval rating of this or that legislation among millionaires, basically, and among corporate giants. So you could, if you have like all the corporations are for a bill and none of the people are for the bill's still going to pass. And vice versa. If all the people want universal health care, but the corporations don't want it, it's not going to pass. So obviously that we have basically a whole arm of government that's quite literally bought and paid for in the US Congress. And then these presidential campaigns are spending so much money, like a farcically high amount of money. And it's so much more than they even used to spend. And so it goes on and on. I mean, there's so many layers and levels to which sort of big money dominates politics and basically controls what the politicians say. I mean, just yesterday you had Kamala Harris reducing the capital gains tax plan that she had. I mean, who paid for that change in policy? Somebody paid for it, but it's not considered a big scandal. So, I mean, I think that's the big part of it. And then the other side is just the way the media is functioning in all this is, I think, really quite troubling. Like the story in the Washington Post about the Chinese, the incident when Xi Jinping visited San Francisco last year. I mean, here you had the media working with the American Enterprise Institute, a think tank, and with different CIA cutout kind of NGOs using facial recognition software and AI to recreate who was everybody who was at this protest, whether or not they were involved in any kind of criminal conduct, and trying to basically recreate who was at the protest, who spoke to who before this or that scuffle took place. This is an article that came out earlier this week. It showed that like there's this, it's sort of like the accusation is a confession. Here you have all these institutes, think tanks, media organizations working side by side with basically the government, sort of doing what the government would like to do, but sometimes can't openly do it because there's something called the First Amendment. But now you have all these other people doing it, and it's all in the name of catching the foreign adversary. So now you have, basically people's own free speech being shut down. They're being harassed, they're being doxxed in the name of catching the foreign adversary. So everything's sort of been flipped on its head. And you might be surprised to find out the American Enterprise Institute, which did a lot of the research for that article, received $500,000 in an undisclosed donation, basically, from the Taiwanese authorities. So, wouldn't you want to put that in the article that, one of the organizations that's supplying the quotes and the research to the Washington Post to go after Chinese American activists is actually being funded by Taiwanese authorities? And then they come after groups like us. They come after groups like Breakthrough and say that we're part of some foreign subversive plot. This is why this is a kind of a emotional and near and dear subject to all of us, all three of us here, because we're not, this is not some idle abstract discussion for us. There have been attacks on Breakthrough just the same, simply because we're putting forward essentially an anti-imperialist narrative. They say, well, now you are echoing the talking points of this or that state, and because you've appeared on this or that channel, therefore we are doing propaganda for this or that country. I mean, it's a huge logical leap, but if it's sort of said over and over and over by these institutions that people are told they're supposed to trust, people start to sort of believe them. And I think that's the real danger to independent media and to free speech.
No, I think it's a good point. I mean, it's a thought police sort of thing. I mean, in the indictment that, captured some of these right-wing influencers who even the FBI said were unwitting, right? Like, didn't know the money allegedly was coming from Russia, which is, again, all allegations. I thought it was interesting. The exact phrase they used was, I think this was the exact phrase, that their programs sometimes coincided, quote unquote, with Russian talking points like their opposition to the war in Ukraine. Why is Putin not responding to our talking points? Why is it only one? You know what I'm saying? It's like two people. So if I say the sky's blue and Putin says the sky's blue, that's a Russian talking point. I mean, there's a certain level of just like facts on the ground that people are going to come to certain conclusions. But I mean, to your point, Ben, it is the thought police, where it's like the only way that you can be sure that no one will ever accuse you of being a Russian, Chinese, Iranian, Hamas, Hezbollah, Cuba, Venezuela, let's just keep naming the countries, agent, is to just only say the things that the State Department, the FBI, and the CIA and the White House say. That's the only way you won't be accused. So it's like it feels very thought police-like to me.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it in history. If any time your opinions coincide with the opinions of a foreign government, therefore in some ways, therefore you may or may not be the unwitting or the witting agent of them and a foreign agent. Just think about how absurd that easily could get. I mean, it basically means that any opposition to the Ukraine war, for instance, where you might not want hundreds of billions of dollars going to fund another forever war. You might want that to go to people in need of housing or food or healthcare in the United States, or to develop countries and build them up in South and Central America. Or you might think that's a better use of the money, and this is a complete gift to the military contractors. But if you make that point, you are coinciding with Russian talking points. I mean, I hope people can kind of see through what this is. But obviously, and then you take a step back even further. Okay, the U.S. is openly spending hundreds of millions of dollars helping civil society and media groups through the National Endowment for Democracy in over 100 countries. How much of that money do you think is going to anti-imperialist, anti-American organizations, Eugene? Do you think it's going to mostly those? Or I bet they're trying to build an echo chamber. If you go and look at who is the U.S. supporting in Botswana or Zimbabwe or Djibouti, they're probably looking for who are the influencers and media organizations that are raising doubts about Chinese influence in the country. I would bet that's where the NED money is mostly going. I don't think you're going to find a lot of support of pro-China media organizations if you go look into those NED grants. So therefore, I mean, they're basically doing the same thing openly. And if you are a country like Iran or Russia or China, just to think about it as like a thought experiment, the idea that if you're Iran, your ability potentially to sell oil to be able to provide for your country actually is contingent on who sits in the White House in Washington, or if you're in Venezuela, or you're in any of these countries that are under sanctions, and literally whoever's sitting in Washington could determine whether your country goes into an economic tailspin or is able to survive. Well, in a way, it's like the empire has created its influence everywhere. And then it says, well, look, they're trying to influence us. They're trying to influence the empire. Like, of course, they're trying to influence the empire. It wouldn't surprise me if they were, because it would only be logical when you have your boot on the neck of those countries that they'd be trying to think of different ways to get your boot off their neck. So, I mean, there's that element is just, again, like really, do they think that, like, what kind of world do they think we're living in? The U.S. can just do this everywhere and no one's ever going to do it back. I'm not even saying any of it has legitimacy, but like they're living in some sort of like fairy tale world where we can influence the politics of every country, but everyone's supposed to basically just sit back and hope that U.S. politics turns out for the best for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally absurd. I mean, when you lay it out like that, it's totally absurd. But I guess that's why we had to start Breakthrough News, and you're not constantly being, brought onto CNN to lay these things out, because obviously it just so easily punctures what you get from the Anderson Coopers of the world. But sorry, I think I cut you off.
Well, I was just thinking, the other thing is there are lots of other governments that give openly to U.S. institutions. I just wanted to name them because I feel like they don't get named enough. And I could feel you were about to end the segment.
Wow.
And I was like, I got to get this.
You want to get this in. Please, you know what?
I got to get this out. I have to get this out. Because, okay, so Norway, the country of Norway, is giving millions to the Center for Global Development. Qatar is giving millions to the Brookings Institute. I already said Taiwan and the American Enterprise Institute. UAE giving millions to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Saudi Arabia, millions to the Middle East Institute. These are all the same institutes that are then quoted in media articles about those very same countries and their core national interests. So like massive open foreign nations influence operations are like funding the whole think tank industry in Washington, D.C. I just had to put that out there because it's like, that's the other part about it. It's so selective and hypocritical. It's ridiculous.
No, it's important.
Well, sometimes, Ben, just to add to that real quick, sometimes, Ben, those same institutes you mentioned also receive money from the State Department. That's the other hilarious aspect of it. Yeah.
Military contractors spend a huge amount of money on think tanks. No, it would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. But, I think it's critical for people to know that and to find that and to see, the influence and how it's going. So we'll, of course, continue to cover this in a range of different ways. But as always, Dr. Ben Becker, editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News, unsurprisingly on point. Thank you so much for offering us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you. You're doing great work.
Appreciate that.
Wow. That means a lot coming from him.
Yeah, I mean, it's the editor-in-chief, so that's important. Rania, any other comments you want to make there?
I mean, yeah, it's quite incredible, the hypocrisy of the way all of it gets framed when, if you literally go to any major think tank, especially the ones that Ben referenced, you can go look at their donor page and it is like NATO, it's the State Department, it's Saudi Arabia, it's the UAE, it's on and on and on and on. It's Lockheed Martin. It's randomly Facebook. Like, it's just all of these different entities influencing here and there. And you're really going to sit there and complain about foreign influence when you literally receive foreign influence? It's just, come on, guys. How dumb do you think we are? It's an insult to our intelligence.
Yes. Don't insult it. I mean, you look at the social media companies and you look at who advises them or governs their policy on what to censor and what not to censor, and it's like people from the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, MI6. Like, I mean, it's like the exact same people coming into social media companies and being like, these are the things that are said to be wrong. And this, has actually been a little scandal with Facebook. The right-wing, the pro-Zionist community is very upset with them because I guess it turned out that at one point there was a push to get them to censor the slogan "From the River to the Sea," and they decided not to after under a whole discussion because they said it was not genocidal hate speech, which of course it is not. But that being said, now it's like, how could they ever do this? Like, you know, obviously they're suppressing everything like crazy, but it turns out like the one time they didn't like, you know, falsely suppress something, it's creating a whole big crisis. But no, I think it's, you know, it really is wild, honestly. And it's obvious to me that the U.S. intelligence community is trying to make this a huge story in the election. You know, who does it help more? I think let's see how it plays out. I think they're trying to, you know, in a way, I think it right as of yesterday probably hurts Trump more, but then a lot of the China stuff, which touches more on the relationship between Democrats and the Chinese American community and these sort of scurrilous allegations, you know, also hurts Democrats. So it seems like the intelligence community is trying to keep the politicians in line and the voters in line of what the red lines are in U.S. foreign policy. So, you know, again, you talk about the quote unquote deep state, deep politics, worth considering. Well, let's move to our next story here, and that is, you know, many of the ongoing actions happening in the West Bank, the escalation from the Israeli government, you know, the massive violence of settlers, which is pretty much constant there in the West Bank. And we are honored to be joined here by Alice Kisiya, who is an activist from the occupied West Bank. Alice, thank you so much for being with us.
Hello, thank you. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you here, and of course, I think for many people around the world, they saw you confronting these settlers in a very brave way, and I guess that's just where I wanted to start, because I think a lot of people are seeing the escalation happening in the West Bank, but it does seem that this level of violence from the military, the police, and settlers is really actually a constant part of life there where you are.
Yeah, actually, as a Palestinian who has citizenship, I wouldn't think to have no rights in this. The way that we're acting is so violent, and they're supporting the settlers against citizens. It's even worse. I'm just defending my land and my rights as a all justice and to get back my land, because we have a court decision and they should go through the law. But as of course, they don't respect any international law or even their own law.
Rania?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if the sound went off or not. Yeah. Alice, you know, you obviously, like, your family has been fighting land theft, as many other families have been, and like you mentioned, having another citizenship from a Western country hasn't exactly helped. I'm curious if you can talk a bit about what's been happening across the West Bank, because Gaza obviously is so horrific and has been getting most of the attention because of what's taking place there. But just since August 28th, I think over 30 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank alone. Israel has escalated dramatically across the West Bank, both with its military and with settler activity. So can you give us an idea of what's taking place across this area? And, you know, obviously what's happening to your family is a part of that.
They took the war and what's happening in the West Bank, and they are grabbing more lands. They are stealing that. They have this since 76 years, and it's nothing new. But our family case kind of many stories in this case, because the JNF, which is the Jewish National Fund, it's having kids, and they are brainwashing the kids. They are 12, 13, 14 years old with weapons and knives. And to be honest, they are violent, but in my case, I'm a little bit stronger with my citizenship against, though it didn't help with the military, but against the settler, it might be help a little bit. And issuing the military order, the land says, because they have no official documents, And the way that they are stealing lands through the support of the military, it's now all everyone. And they declared another military order. Yesterday they took over our tent, so now the solidarity tent is gone, but I'm planning to get it back as possible. They are trying to provoke us in every way, and in every they are threatening me time to get arrested. It's very sensitive. It's sensitive to talk about maybe the Gaza because they are waiting for something to put me in jail. But what I want to say, this violence it's been since 76 years. The way they were expelling people from it's nothing new, and the world is watching, and the whole organizations and churches and everyone is. I think it's the right time that people and churches and US and every country should intervene. And for my citizenship, I have another citizenship. Still, there is negotiations between the French and the Israelis, but they don't respect anyone, and so I think it's gonna. But what I believe is that I'm gonna get my land back, and everyone's what's his.
Right on. No, that's important. Alice, we're having a couple tech issues, so we're going to see if we can address that here, and swing back around here to this. But thank you for joining us here, and we'll see what we can do on that point there. Alice Kisiya, of course, who many people saw confronting those settlers. We'll see if we can jimmy that around.
Incredibly brave. Incredibly brave. I hope we can. Yeah, I hope we can fix that issue because she's incredibly brave. She was arrested and then released. And I mean, look, it's no joke. Not that it's any joke to get arrested anywhere, Eugene, but you see what the Israeli military apparatus is capable of. You see what they do to Palestinians. And you see what they do to Palestinians who even have Western citizenship. Palestinian Americans, Palestinian French citizens. It doesn't really seem to matter to them. They subject them to all kinds of horrific levels of violence, torture, worse. I don't even want to say at this point because, just hearing from Alice, I mean, it's just incredibly brave to stand up. But this is the situation Palestinians are put in, right? Like it's settler colonialism, and it's literally defending your existence and your access to your home. So yeah, I think it's really important to take into account the bravery of people who have no choice but to put themselves on the on the line and in between this disgusting settler colonial military apparatus that is funded by our tax dollars to defend their families.
Yeah, no, I think that's critically important, and I mean, I think it speaks to how complicit these countries are, France, the United States, the UK, with what's going on. And I thought Alice made a great point. She says it's been going on for 76 years, since the very beginning. I mean, really, you could say over 100 years if we go to the Balfour Declaration. I mean, the very establishment of this entity. And I saw someone bring this out in a New York Times article from the Zionist conference of the 1890s about Israel when they decided they were going to try to go there and form it. And it actually has the subhead, the New York Times article, it's like Jews meet wherever they met, will colonize Palestine. So this has actually been the plan from the beginning. We know that the way that they sold sold it to the British to get the support in the context of the Balfour Declaration was they said that we will be the guard for the West against, all the countries of Asia and other places. I mean, they use some racist language about Asiatic hordes, I think, even in that context. I don't have the exact quote, but, if you check out the book Palestine, Israel, and U.S. Empire by Richard Becker, you can get the whole story. But it's really actually amazing when you think about it. They were 100% upfront about it. The UK, then subsequently the U.S., France as well. It's been a major supporter, by the way, of Israel, I think, up until the 73 war, really, even. Some would say 67, I would say 73. France was the main military supplier to Israel, right? And the Mirage jets and all these other pieces, that they view Israel as so important to their ability to maintain this, Euro-American empire over the rest of the world, that they will actually throw the rights of their own citizens under the bus. Things that they would never allow any other country to do to their own citizens, they will allow Israel to do, and they will completely ignore it. And in fact, will assist them in covering it up. I mean, that's like we talk about Shireen Abu Akleh. I mean, they were basically going out of their way to help Israel cover up what actually took place. We had the individual who was an American citizen shot by the police recently, who was on Breakthrough. We had the video of him. I haven't heard anything from the U.S. government about what they're doing around that. And I don't want to celebrate anything, but the hostage, the American Israeli hostage, it's like all of the conversation is, everyone's talking about it. The whole government is talking about it. Well, what about the Palestinian Americans who are in Gaza? I mean, there are definitely Americans in Gaza who have been killed and who live there, who do have American citizenship. Hold on really quickly. I think we do have Alice again with us. Alice, thank you so much for getting back with us. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
And
it's all right.
oh no, of course, please. To build on Rania's point, and I think the point you were making there at the end, this has been a long history. It's been going on for 76 years, but it does seem like Palestinians are not going away. I mean, it really does feel like that this is not something that can just be swept under the rug, despite the crimes and the violence of these settlers.
Yeah, Palestinians are really a tough people. They defend themselves. And for me and my family, we will not accept to leave. We've been in this case for more than 10 years. And we've been facing lots of troubles. And actually, when I got arrested at the court, I see the court decision, and the one who was accusing me is not settlers, it's the state of Israel. So how come that the state of Israel is accusing me for defending my land? It's really complicated, and it's about a simple family that is facing a Smith or Ben Gavir. It's getting crazier here in the West Bank, doing whatever they can because it's under war. So basically, especially in Bethlehem, which is the last Christian village, and El Makhrur, it's very as a UNESCO heritage site, and we can't see any. Let's say UNESCO, it's trying to intervene, but we cannot see actions here. Very sad.
I want to ask you, Alice, because everything you're saying is so important, but also there's a human, like a personal level to this, and maybe this is a little bit of like a personal question on my from me. But you're really into fitness. You're a fitness trainer. You have this whole life that you have. I mean, for a lot of people in the U.S., Palestinians are just these people whose land keeps getting stolen and who keep getting bombed and shot and killed. But you have lives, and you have personal lives and personal dreams. And I'm just curious if you can tell us a little bit about what your life is like. What do you do in life, and how has this occupation, this land theft, affected your ability to live your life as a fitness instructor?
Okay. First of all, just to let know everyone, here we have normal life. We have gyms. We have parties. We swim. It's not really what they think. It's very lovely. It's very nice here. And I'm a fitness trainer and journalist, and also in a fitness competition. But before 1 year and a half, I had a motorcycle accident because I was working as a delivery to get money. The lawyer that deceived us in this case, and for now, I have done 3 surgeries, and I have another surgery next month, and it's affected my life in a way that I was almost going to die because of trying to get money to pay for the lawyer because we need money to get back our land. And the family, we were living in tents for 5 years in our land after the demolition of my house and my restaurant, the family restaurant. And they have demolished more 20 times. It's crazy. Um, they even bring big bulldozers for a small tent. It's so insane that we have to face not only this, we have so a lack of money, a lack of life, stress, psychological effects. So it's affecting my career. Now I have to, I'm not working since 1 year and a half because, I now have a problem with my leg, and I'm trying to fix it with physiotherapy, with the gym, to work on myself. And even this period of time, not focusing on that. So everything, it's crazy, but at the end, I'm saying that it goes through God's plan, and thank God that I'm alive. And I'm very thankful I have my family beside me and the people I love. And actually, as long as I'm breathing, I will keep fighting to get back what was to me.
Well, Alice, I have to say it was an absolute honor for us to have you with us here. I appreciate you being
Thank
willing
you.
to join us. I know it's late over there, but thank you so much for being with us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye.
I mean, that's quite a story, and it's such a common story. I mean, to have your entire life upended because of something you had to do, because you have to pay for lawyers so you can get your land back because of this ridiculous, absurd occupation. And that's just one of so many Palestinians. I think we need to remember that these are not just, people who are victimized by settler colonialism, which they are, but they're also people who are just like us, who have normal daily routines they want to get to, and daily jobs they want to get to, and dreams they want to fulfill. And this disgusting military occupation just destroys it all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the undercurrent of the organization. We are not numbers. That, of course, Rifat al-Hariri, who was assassinated there in Gaza, was a co-founder of, and a number of other people, and really trying to humanize Palestinian people for those around the world to see that it's not just the 40,000 dead, probably more than, who knows how many it's going to be. Unfortunately, it's not just the numbers of people, but every person was a life, a story. And I think a lot of us who are watching it on social media and seeing this genocide in real time, you're seeing a lot of these pictures of people in their graduation gowns and, doing various different things. And, I've even saw some of the people who've been documenting what's been happening who are like not journalists, but who are like teachers or whatever. But in the context of this, they've now turned into citizen journalists to document the genocide of their people and what's happening. And obviously the West Bank now, it's continuing. I mean, they're using the old phrase that they used to use about Gaza, that they're mowing the lawn. And I think some of these, pictures that are here, I mean, they tear up the streets, they destroy the infrastructure. They have arrested thousands of individuals and people, for no reason whatsoever. Many of them just held in administrative detention, no charges, no nothing, for however long they want to hold them for or not hold them for, what they charge them, maybe not. The entire thing is just unbelievable in a way. I mean, it's happening, but it's outrageous.
It really is. I remember seeing this story. I mean, this must have been maybe like 2-3 months into genocide in Gaza. It was a story about this like basically fitness trainer guy who was like a gym buff who had joined some militant group because he's like, what else am I supposed to do in Gaza? Like, it's like they've just destroyed everything. Like, literally, what else am I supposed to do? Yeah. And I'm like, the U.S. makes this. I mean, look, people are going to always resist, but people also just want to live their lives. Like, they just want to live their lives. Like, they shouldn't be put in this position in the first place to have to fight for their survival like this. And as much as we should just like see that and see it as like, wow, it's also just people shouldn't have to make these choices. This shouldn't be happening in the first place. Like, people's land, people's restaurants shouldn't be demolished 20 times. Like, that's such an insane story she just told. And there's so many of them. And you just don't know where it ends, And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just repeating myself. It's just really upsetting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really is amazing in a way to look at how none of this really has to be happening, and the idea that is put forward in the mainstream media that like it's too complex, it's been going on for 2,000 years, like all of which is just like totally fake. I mean, I guess anything is complex if you don't know anything about it, but once you actually learn what's going on, it's actually not complex whatsoever. I mean, a group of people stole a huge amount of land, have tried to expel as many of the people who were living on the land as possible, and make life as difficult as possible for those who stayed, so that they hopefully also will leave. And you could see that because if you saw Netanyahu's map the other day when he was giving some sort of weird briefing or something, the West Bank wasn't even on the map. So, you know, the
Right.
Zionists say that you can't say from the river to the sea, but that is Netanyahu's program. The entire Likud program, it's written down that what they call quote unquote Judea and Samaria, which is all of historical Palestine, parts of Lebanon, and parts of Syria, by the way, as well, that all of that is Israel. And that is the official U.S. government policy. So from the river to the sea, you can have an apartheid, ethnically
Right.
cleansed state, but Palestinians aren't allowed to chant for their own liberation and freedom. Really wild. Well, in the context of all of that, we want to move to our next story, which is related to the ongoing BDS campaigns all around the globe. But here in the United States, I think many people can remember last spring when students around the U.S. really raised the banner of solidarity with Palestine in a powerful, powerful way. At San Francisco State University, the efforts emerging from that have resulted in some concrete victories for divestment there. And we are really honored to be joined here by Dr. Rama Ali Kassad, who's a professor of race and resistance studies at San Francisco State University, and Max Flint, who's with the Students for Gaza and the General Union of Palestinian Students at San Francisco State as well. Thank you both so much for being with us here on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Well,
Thanks for having us.
No, it's really great to have you here. I think this is a super important story of what's happening, and I kind of want both of your thoughts on this, but maybe Max, I'll just start with you. Tell us what took place. I mean, I know that there's been some big divestment victories. What has San Francisco State University agreed to do?
So we've actually agreed to divesting from weapons manufacturers that are aiding and abetting the genocide in Gaza. And at the same time, we are in talks and waiting for our human rights proposal to be passed. So we were actually able to create, alongside the administration through the work of the encampment, a human rights screening that would force our university to divest from any company abroad that violates human rights as defined by international law.
I think that now as we enter a new semester, I think that as the summer began, most of the pro-Israel advocates were hoping, as well as members of Congress, were hoping that all of this activism for Gaza, for Palestine would just subside, stop, go away, die out. A new semester has begun, and you all are beginning it with quite a punch. But I'm curious what your response is to the fact that students are actually rising up across campuses again. This hasn't gone away whatsoever. And in fact, people are coming back even more, fired up and ready to, fight for justice in Palestine than they were before.
Yeah, I think it's important that we keep moving forward, not only because, obviously the genocide is still going on. The encampments were super powerful, but they obviously weren't enough to end all U.S. aid to Israel, and we need to keep that fight going, no matter if we win divestment at our universities or not. My comrades at different schools across the state and across the nation were arrested, brutalized at UCLA. Those people aren't going to forget that. Just because the summer happened, we didn't forget the genocide was going on. We have a lot more work to do, and we're nowhere close to done. Divestment is the bare minimum, and we're looking to spark a larger movement for labor, for whatever it's going to take to end U.S. aid to Israel, because we're tired of seeing our tax dollars, our tuition money, funding a genocide at the same time, like that we, at SF State, they're raising our tuition. The housing crisis in San Francisco is horrible. All these issues play into each other, all this money going to the military, and we're sick of it.
You know, Rama, I feel that, I mean, well, one, this just on its own is a big victory, I think, in many ways, because this is what so many people have been pushing towards, is to really, ramp up divestment activities here in the United States, where, all of our institutions are so complicit. I was hoping you could also speak to this in the context of, especially talking about the struggle being ongoing, the continuum. I mean, we're talking about San Francisco State, the longest ever student strike in history, the Third World Student Front. I mean, going back so many years, there's this history at SFSU of students making big stands like this. So I was hoping you could also put this in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me. I think it's important to note that, student activism, specifically around Palestine, goes back decades, right? With the formation of the Organization of Arab Students in the 1950s, and then the General Union of Palestine Students in the late 70s, and then the rise of NSJPs and SJPs across the nation in the early 2000s. So organizing, I always say that students are our igniters of our movement. They're the stewards of our movements. They carry our movement forward. They ensure we keep the history intact and the goals intact. So organizing for Palestine is part and parcel of our movement for the liberation of Palestine. In terms of SF State, yes, like you said, Eugene, SF State has a long history of student activism. It's part of the values and the mission and the culture embedded at SF State. San Francisco had, again, the longest student strike in history in the late 60s, led by the BSU, led by the Third World Liberation Front, to demand an education that not only reflected, the truths of their histories and their stories and their communities, but also an education where they can engage in real discourse around how do we create change in the community? How do we challenge racial injustice? How do we challenge economic injustice? How do we challenge social injustice? So that's the location of San Francisco State. And we utilize that history, carrying it forward as part of this campaign. And I want to say, just a little bit about the encampment at SF State. Our encampment started a little bit later than most of the encampments. The encampment started in late April. And there were a couple of unique unique things that happened at our encampment that I want to note. Again, a lot of other universities were doing this, but I know what we were doing at SF State. Some of those unique features was we elected students, wanted a democratic process as soon as possible and elected a student body to represent them, to ensure that the encampment was representative of who was in the encampment, but also the communications, the demands were clear and stayed intact throughout the process. We also held the very first public negotiations. Students asked the administration to come down to the encampment and held a public, the first meeting of the encampment administration was public, with hundreds, and media were part of that and watched that negotiation happen publicly. And third, the faculty on our campus, as soon as the tents sprung up, organized themselves tightly and declared that they would be the front line, ensuring that our students were safe, ensuring that what we saw, the dehumanization that we saw happening across the campus, wasn't happening on our campus. That we wanted to ensure that the students' voices were clear, their demands are clear, and that they were safe. And I think those were some of the main features of our encampment on our campus. It was a very unified front on our encampment.
So this is a question I want to ask to both Max and to you, Dr. Rama, and I'll start with Max on this, in the sense that, both students and professors are facing some serious attacks across the country by the Israel lobby, as well as just establishment politicians who, want to protect imperialism in various ways, whether it's like smear campaigns and slander by various organizations, or in the case of professors, I mean, you've had these sort of McCarthyist witch hunt type hearings in front of Congress, naming specific people and demanding they be fired, right? So, Max, I want to start with you on this. What's your response as a student? I know perhaps, at San Francisco State University, there's a little bit more support than you might get at other schools, but this is certainly something that, students are having to really decide whether they want to put their names behind supporting the, stopping, for example, Israel weapons to Israel, because it could perhaps impact their ability to stay in school. It could impact their ability to get a job in the future. I'm curious how you respond to that, and maybe what your message is to students who might be watching and want to get involved, but they're afraid because of what they saw happen last semester.
I would say the best response to repression, and we saw this with Colombia, as soon as the encampment had sprung up and their president had told NYPD to storm that encampment, it brought more students to the cause, because it's easy to arrest 50 students who are doing a protest, but if hundreds and thousands of students are standing up and using their voices to fight for Palestinian liberation, to fight to end all U.S. aid to Israel, there's no more threat of being doxxed. Because if the entire country is saying the exact same thing, if students are walking out of their classes saying the exact same thing, you can't single out students, you can't single out leaders, because the people are with you. The mass movement is with you. So I would say to students across the country, the encampments were effective, but we're going to need to build something bigger, a mass movement, something that will spark something larger, that will unite students, and not just students, but labor, because we can't do this without labor. And we like to harp on that at San Francisco State. We couldn't have done that without the labor union, with our professors here at State protecting us. And we really think that the encampments were great, but we're looking forward. We don't want to get stuck on that. And the repression is just going to keep coming if our movement gets smaller.
Yeah. And Dr. Rama, I guess, could you maybe respond to the sort of position that professors are put in with this issue, because you're talking about people's livelihoods being threatened, and in some cases being blacklisted in ways that will just make it impossible to ever be able to get work in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I think first we need to hold the administration accountable and the forces that are enabling this and bowing down to the bullying that's happening, right? I think people have been exposed, right? The people who are attacking pro-Palestinian voices, the supremacists and the racists that are attacking the pro-Palestinian voices, are joining forces with other right-wing, other supremacists and other forces, attacking things like pro-Palestinian voices, attacking critical ethnic studies, attacking critical race theory. We saw that at CSULA, right? It was the Zionists and the white supremacists who joined forces to attack our students, and the administration sat by and just let it happen, right? I think we need to hold administration accountable. I think we need to hold those who have the ruling power accountable, the institutional power, to say you can't bow down to supremacists, right? You can't bow down to the racists. You can't bow down to folks who are impeding on the academic freedom, quote unquote, of faculty and students, right? And these are the same people who don't care about public institutions, right? And again, for bullying our public institutions, they're the ones who are advocating for the unfunding and the disinvestment from our public institutions, and our administration and those in power are bowing down to them, right? And it's time for us to hold those folks accountable in this new McCarthyism era that we're seeing, and that's sending shockwaves, right? That who's actually promoting this, who's pushing it, and holding those folks accountable, right? When we look at who those folks are, it's not people who care about public institutions like San Francisco State University, right? Or an education that reflects the true history of this country or other countries. So for us, we need to continue exposing that, and we need to continue holding those folks accountable.
No, well, critically important points and critically important work, and I really appreciate it. Dr. Rama Ali Kassad, Max Flint, thank you both so much for joining us here and bringing us this positive message of struggle and some victories. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Free Palestine.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, Eugene.
Yeah.
Speaking
Rania?
of Palestine, since we're on a roll,
yes.
It's wild to me how over the last week, we had this news of Israeli hostages having been found dead. And I mean, I just saw this outpouring. It was really like a tsunami of U.S. political figures expressing extreme sadness. And that's fine. Be sad, people. When people are killed, when people die, nobody wants anyone to die. I certainly don't want anyone to die. But I saw a way larger outpouring of sadness and heartbreak over 6 people than I have over, and this is an underestimate, a very, very big underestimate, but I'm going to use it anyway. 40,000 Palestinians. Like, not a statement. No one cares. It's always excused. It's always justified. And that speaks to a lot. It speaks to an entire culture that we have that devalues the lives of Palestinians so much that one Israeli Jewish life is worth literally thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Palestinians. And, nothing really proved that to me more than some recent clips that came to light of this podcast. I know you probably saw them. They were making their way around the internet. I believe the podcast is called Two Nice Jewish Boys. They're Israeli, though one of them sounds very American. So
one of them, I believe, is actually from the United States.
Yeah, like he has like a very distinctly Native American US accent. And so they're just sitting there kind of like talking like bro-y, hanging out. We're two guys just sitting at a table with our podcast microphones. But what they were saying, and I'm saying this as somebody, and you too, Eugene, we've watched this genocide unfold for the last almost 11 months now, and we've seen some horrific statements from Israelis. But this might be some of the most deranged, insane, psychotic stuff I've ever seen. And I think we're going to play some of it if we can bring that up. Can we bring that up?
We may not be prepared for that. Unfortunately, it seems like the clip failed. We're not able to bring that up right now. So why don't you just explain to people what was said?
Okay, so I think a lot of people who are watching probably saw these clips, so I will explain what was said. There was two clips in particular. This was from a longer podcast, but basically in one of them, they're making this joke, and it's not really a joke. They're talking about how they wish that they had a genocide button. That if there was a genocide button, they would be happy to push it and kill every single Palestinian across not just Gaza, but the territories, as they called them. And one of them, especially, it was the American guy, the Israeli American guy, who was like, I'm just going to say it because that's how Israelis feel. That's how Israeli Jews feel. And they won't, that's what they'll say. If you go around asking them, they'll be happy. And then they just kept talking about a genocide button. Like it was no big deal. And then there was another clip where they were talking about how, they don't really care what's happening in Gaza, as they use the term Nakba tents. They're living over there in their Nakba tents. And I'm just, we don't care because, Israelis are just, they're going and getting ice cream and they're taking their girlfriends out to concerts. And one of them was like, yeah, me and my girlfriend were out at a concert yesterday. It was so great. And what I was thinking that would make the concert better is if we had basically a Jumbotron showing Palestinians in Gaza homeless in their tents. That would make it better in their Nakba tents. And you're just like blown away that these guys are just sitting totally relaxed, totally safe, totally happy, and just hoping more death and destruction and homelessness on people that they are actively starving. And they're telling you this is how most people we know feel. And so I kind of appreciate the honesty, but also I just want to say, Eugene, could you imagine if like me and one of my Lebanese friends, one of my Palestinian friends, sat here in the Middle East and had a podcast that we put on YouTube where I was saying those kinds of things about Israelis? Do you think that the media would just let it go? Do you think it would just be like a passing thing on Twitter like this was? Or do you think maybe it would get some media coverage and would be said to be expressing the sentiments of people here? Then I would probably get in a lot of trouble as an American. I would never say things like that, by the way, or believe things like that. I'm just making a note about the hypocrisy and the double standards because I didn't see that covered anywhere. Just like I didn't see covered anywhere that Israel has a network of rape dungeons that several human rights organizations and Palestinians themselves have confirmed exist. Just like I don't see covered anywhere the fact that, you have genocidal statements like this regularly across the New York Times. Like you won't see this in the New York Times. You won't see this in the Washington Post. You won't see it maybe on CNN if Jeremy Diamond, who's like, by the way, one CNN correspondent that's done a pretty good job covering things in Gaza. But except for stuff from him, not very much coming out on any of this stuff. It's just one massive constant cover up of this disgusting behavior that is a testament to a society that has been completely indoctrinated to support like egomaniacally
Yeah.
and
Well,
joyously
I think we do have the
supporting
clip.
Germany.
I think we do have the clip.
Okay.
So before I say anything, let's play it. I think it does,
Yeah.
the impact of it
It
is.
deserves, let
anyway.
them speak for themselves.
If you gave me a button to just erase Gaza, every single living being in Gaza would no longer be living tomorrow, I would press it in a second. That's just, I think most Israelis
If
probably
that's the
agree.
choice, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, even if it's not like right now,
Yeah, no.
I would press it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the same with the territories.
I would press it right now.
Mm-hmm.
No choice. No, Sharon is safe at home. God willing, I don't know. I haven't spoken to her in like an hour.
No, I'm saying for the chance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would press it right now. Give me that button and press it right now.
there you go.
And I think most Israelis would.
Yeah, most Jewish
They wouldn't.
Israelis.
They wouldn't post. They wouldn't talk about it like I am.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't post. They wouldn't say I pressed it,
Yeah,
but they would.
they
press
don't
it.
have balls of steel like you.
They would, but they would press it, right? Like if they were in a
Yeah.
closet alone, they wouldn't even hesitate.
Mm-hmm.
Someone came to them and Hadar said, "No one will know. You press this, all the Palestinians are gone." You'd be like, "Fucking hey, is there another one?"
One thing I think is interesting about that video is how the guy corrects him. When he says most Israelis, he says most Jewish Israelis, which I think is undoubtedly true, but it also speaks to the extreme, like racist, racialized nature of this settler colonial project, and that there is a total apartheid style system. And, there's so many things you could say about that. It speaks to your point in terms of it speaks to their culture, because even if you thought that, you'd think a lot of people would be like, well, let's just not say it though, because like, come on, please, it's the internet. But they don't care because their constituency of people do support that. Obviously, well before this current incident, our mutual friend Abby Martin, was there at the Empire Files in Israel and interviewing people on the street. Basically, that's the attitude of the people. I saw Chris Hayes of MSNBC say the other day, I don't understand why these photos are coming out of these Israeli soldiers. Why aren't they trying to stop them? The ones of them wearing women's underwear and desecrating people's homes and stuff like that. Like, why aren't they cracking down on that? And, an ostensibly smart person saying that, it's great. They're not cracking down on it because they don't care. Like, obviously, the fact that you don't see those kind of images coming around from other militaries, basically in every other country on earth that is on any sort of war, is because they do care. Because they don't want people to think that they're in their own countries, that these are like crazy, barbaric crusades. But in Israel, as that video that you showed from the podcasters lays out, this is what people want: a barbaric crusade against Palestinians to destroy them, and to, at the very least, to push them out, but to kill as many of them as they can, I think, on the way out, so that they don't try to come back and reclaim the land and the things that have been stolen for them. But I do think that in the context of the whole thing, if you go like to the late 70s, there were all these videos that used to always come out from like Rhodesia at the time, Zimbabwe now, of like settlers living very well, with pools and manicured lawns and being very well armed. Like honestly, very similar to what you see now in the settlements, like these nice little suburban settlements, and then people like shopping in the grocery store with an M16, right? And I just say all that just to say that like, those people also felt they were totally invincible and nothing could ever change. And not that long after they took those videos, everything did change. And that's why, 2/3 of them live in Canada and the United States and Australia now, because they were so racist they couldn't live in a country with black people, by and large. And I think that to me is the thing I'm reflecting on, is as disgusting as it is, I think it reveals the reality of the settler colonial project, and honestly, just like the extreme decay of what's happening there, that they just feel totally emboldened, like nothing's going to happen. You're surrounded by 1 billion people who hate you. And there's like another 1 billion people around the world who think that you're reprehensible genocidaires and also hate you and think that your entire political project is illegitimate and should no longer exist. So obviously in South Africa, they felt great about it. In Zimbabwe, they felt great about it. In Kenya, they felt great about it. In Malaysia, they felt great about it. In India, they felt great about it. You know, as Churchill said, the sun's never going to set on the British Empire. And then, of course, the sun went all the way down on the British Empire. You know, these people, I think their level of hubris is foolish. And that these statements will, you know, ultimately are sowing the seeds of their own, of the demise of their own political project, because you can't really continue like this in this context, and I think that's been proven, you know, over the years.
Yeah, and I think also there's the insidious part of this entire situation is that despite comments like that, so shockingly cruel and genocidal, what you'll have is Israel's PR machine wrap them up in anti-Semitism and the Holocaust as like some sort of shield.
Yeah.
So that anybody who is like, oh, this is a horrific system of settler colonialism and apartheid is shut down by this atrocity that was committed by Europeans, mind you. But this horrific genocidal atrocity that was committed by Europeans. And anybody who criticizes what we just saw is supposed to, you know, just shut up because they feel uncomfortable because they don't want to be labeled an anti-Semite. And with that in mind, I want to play the second clip that I thought was really compelling from this discussion between these two, as they call themselves, two nice Jewish boys. Can we put the second clip up?
Doing it
to appease the...
It's because we're looking for international legitimacy. Mm-hmm. No one actually gives a shit. Zero people in Israel, if you go up to them and you're like, do you care if this baby in Gaza gets polio? They'll be like, I don't fucking just.
Yeah, if Oppenheimer would care.
Yeah, okay. There'll be like 20 people who care, and they're all wearing Meretz shirts. Like, fuck them. But seriously, nobody would give a shit. They'd be like, leave me alone, man. I'm trying to like buy
Eat
shit for Shabbat. Like, fuck off. I don't care about this Gazan kid with polio.
Also, as long as they're in their Nakba state in their tents, you know, and we're living still, like, you know, if you put aside the news, day to day is okay. Yesterday we went to a concert in Ayalkon Park. We had lots of fun, me and my girlfriend. Shalom Chanoch. We danced. And it was amazing, and you can't help but think like it's nice to know that you're dancing in a concert while hundreds of thousands of Gazans are, you know,
homeless,
like sitting in a tent and eating.
Makes it even better.
Yeah,
more enjoyable concert. If only they put the
live video
footage of Gaza. Like, but seriously, you guys like that. That's what people don't understand. Look, like, I know that you guys might be appalled by this, some of the listeners, but seriously, this is how Israelis feel. And you might think that Eitan Weinstein and Naor, who like refuses to kind of back me up on it publicly.
I'm from the UN.
Yeah, he's the UN. But you might think I'm extreme. But I have conversations with lots of people, coworkers, friends. People enjoy knowing that they are suffering.
No, also it's very prominent on Twitter.
Well, he's not wrong. It is prominent on Twitter. I mean, the level of hate speech is, I mean, it's off the charts. It's one of these things that like it's hiding in plain sight. Like nobody in Israel is trying to hide this. Like they're openly out here doing all these things, and it's just somehow, some way, it's like the palace. I mean, it's like seeing the DOJ unveil this case against Hamas. I mean. You know, it's like one of these things that they always do with people who are like outside the country. So there's like no one can ever be arrested. So it's just virtue signaling in the first place to say that like, oh, we're doing this thing against. And it's just like, are you kidding me? I mean, 40,000 people have been slaughtered here. I mean, like there's huge amounts. Like you can't even put like a tiny little sanction on Ben Gvir. Like, but you're going to unveil a completely just a complete virtue signaling thing on Hamas just to say that you did it. I mean, it's the level of, well, anyway, I'm not going to get into a long thing because I think people understand what's happening. But I think what people don't understand is that even though it seems like nothing is changing, things are actually changing, and relatively significantly. And I want to read you something, Rania. Here, I have to find it. I just thought about it, so I'm sorry. I have to actually go looking for it, team. But a recent survey that was done on this about how people in Muslim majority countries feel about America in different ways. So in 2024, the survey from this year, it revealed, and I'm reading because I want to get it right, that 75% of Malaysians, 73% of Indonesians, and 70% of people in Brunei said that they would prefer alignment with China over the United States, compared with 55%, 54%, and 55% in 2023, respectively. Now, it did not say exactly why people changed from one year to another, but when they asked them what their top 3 geopolitical concerns were, nearly half ranked the Israel-Hamas conflict at the very top, surpassing the 40% that ranked the more geographically proximate South China Sea dispute more highly. And then they went on to note that of the people who in these countries said it was their top geopolitical concern, it's like 83% of people in Malaysia, 79% of people in Brunei, 75% of people in Indonesia. Anyway, long story short here is what I'm saying is you can see the vast repercussions of what's taking place. That in 3 countries, I mean, Brunei a little lesser, but certainly Malaysia and Indonesia, that have a long history of people of working with the United States and in many ways being U.S. allies. And now you've got the overwhelming majority of people in these countries, actually now saying, you know what? They want to rope us into this thing against China. We seen what they're doing over there in Palestine. Like, nah, forget it. Like, we rather work with China than America. So, I mean, it's not just the global image of America. It's like people are actually saying, and that's like a 20% jump in 1 year of people who said they'd rather be in alliance with China than in America. And seemingly it's basically based on Palestine. I mean, that's a huge shift in public opinion. It's rare public opinion anywhere in the world shifts in big ways like that. I mean, it's shifting in the West, but I think you can see around the world, people are so appalled that even the other imperialist schemes that are going on, like the attempt to isolate China, are actually being kneecapped because of people's extreme anger at what's going on. So you can see the steadfastness of the Palestinian people, their unwillingness to be destroyed, and the fact that this genocide is carrying on and on is just making people question more and more and more every single aspect of their country's relationship to the United States. And I think that's an important factor. So, that guy on the podcast can say, like, I don't care at all. No one cares. We don't want it. Great. You can think whatever you want. You don't have to care. But the other, basically almost the entire rest of the earth actually does care. And people are doing more and more. And it seems like it's a drip, drip, drip. And people, because it's terrible, everything we see. And you look at it and you say, like, how is this still going on? But that drip, drip, drip is not small. I mean, obviously apartheid went on for a long time, right? Like things don't necessarily happen overnight overall. But when it switches, it's a total switch. And I feel there's no coming back from this for Israel. I think these podcasters are totally indicative of the whole society. I think the world has seen that. I think the fact that they voted in the parliament against a Palestinian state on the basis of Oslo. So that's not even that's like a bad deal for Palestinians. Even that is not too much for them. And ultimately, it's like it won't go on forever. How exactly it'll end, it is how it'll end. But I don't think it's going to end just like, oh, there's going to be another 76 years of this. I think that just like Zimbabwe and just like South Africa, Israel's existence as an apartheid settler state is very much in question. I really do believe that.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I think it's important in moments where we're just like, wow, to remember at least that much, because you have to put that in the context too of the amount of soft power that goes into framing the US as the best place on earth. And it works in a lot of places. I mean, you have an entire Hollywood industry that portrays America and its culture as like the most amazing thing ever and the dream that maybe one day you can have, guys. And a lot of people in the global South like see that, and they do think that, wow, America is a wonderful place that I'd love to try and make it in one day. So against all of that, against that massive like propaganda machine, and other things go into that as well, you have this genocide changing that many minds. And, I've seen it play out in real time, Eugene. Like there's people who are like upper class in Lebanon who were very much like, oh, I love the US, I love France before, and now they're disgusted. because of this genocide. They're just and also, Israel's bombing Lebanon too. So yeah, this stuff does make a difference in the long run. And it's the US in a ways. US empire is in between a rock and a hard place because they have to protect their massive investment in the Middle East so they can continue doing imperialism in the Middle East, but at a huge cost at the end of the day. So see how that plays out.
I mean, I sent you this the other day. I mean, the Malaysian company that has the Starbucks brand in Malaysia had to suspend their dividends because they're having so many losses from people boycotting Starbucks. And you could say it's kind of a small thing. I mean, obviously, who knows? It could always turn around. But you start to think, and in Indonesia, there's big boycott campaigns, in Egypt and other places, that some of these American brands, this will actually start to hurt them on the American stock market because all these U.S. brands are big international brands. And so insofar as McDonald's, Coke, all these other people, I mean, you look at all the companies that own McDonald's in Iraq, well, I don't know, actually Iraq I think only has KFC, but in all these other places, they're like, oh, no, we're an independent company. We're not dealing with them. We don't have anything to do with that. Because for these brands sitting in New York and where their headquarters are, it's like American investors and international investors on the U.S. stock market are going to say, okay, well, if you're telling me you're going to expand into 32 countries and make all this money and it's going to help me to invest in your stock, but I can see that all your affiliates in anywhere where there are Muslims, and I believe there's over 1 billion Muslims, are just tanking, why would I invest any money in you whatsoever, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so these are the things that are happening that aren't getting covered in the New York Times, that aren't getting covered in the Washington Post. I might have actually learned that one from Bloomberg, so maybe who am I? But it's either Bloomberg or NDTV from India.
We'll give you that one. We'll give you that
there
one.
It is.
Guys.
But you can see people are just voting with their pocketbook in a way that is beyond what their governments do, in ways that are not only hurting Israeli brands, but they're now hurting American brands. Because in Egypt, there aren't any Israeli brands, But people have still started now boycotting American products because they see the connection.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you live in the Middle East, so you see it in some of these countries. People have made commercials and viral videos to say don't buy. I saw one about Pepsi that might have actually been from Pakistan, I think, but it was basically just
every restaurant. There's no restaurants in my neighborhood that sell Pepsi or Coke anymore. Although no one really sold Coke, it's mostly Pepsi that dominated here. But yeah, lots of restaurants have been since November stopped selling Pepsi products and selling local. It's called, I think, Zero Cola or some weird name like that. But hey, it tastes the same.
Some enterprising person in the UK, I believe, has started a Palestine cola. It's just
beautiful.
A little bit of reward profiteering, but I see where you're at. But again, in a world that's becoming more multipolar, there's the name of it is now eluding me, but that grocery store that's in the Gulf and in UAE and Oman and different places that
it's Z-Cola. Z-Cola, sorry.
Yeah, all the products come from China and other places or whatever. It's getting way more popular because people are we want to shop somewhere where there's no Western products, so we don't have to get on our phone and go through the list. Let's just go to a place that has no thing. So in the context of multipolarity, there actually can be replacements for some of these products in ways that again have big impacts. And this did have a big impact in South Africa, especially when the international brands started to abandon South Africa. That started to a big shift. And obviously the international brands have not abandoned Israel yet, but you can see more and more their local affiliates are being hit. I mean, this whole thing about Iraq with people just ransacking KFCs. I wish this story was reported more in America. And it just basically we're just going to hit anything American right now, including KFC, because we can't support you. People are really going to great lengths, however they can, protesting, taking direct action, boycotting, obviously certain individuals are doing more in terms of the element of resistance in different regional countries. And there's people there's hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq who seem to be itching to go fight. So I don't know. The way I look at it is I just feel it's so terrible, but it's gone to a level that I really believe is a tipping point. And I think the resistance of the Palestinian people has brought it to a tipping point. But anyway, I know we're getting ready to have to come to a close here, but you wanted to say one more point, I think.
Well, I just wanted to end on the note of I certainly hope that disgusting behavior from those two Nice Jewish Boys podcasts that we just watched is indicative of just that's the end is near for that attitude to be tolerated anymore. I mean, like you said, they can sit there and believe what they want and not care and enjoy the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. And it's horrifying. And obviously they feel they can say that because there are no consequences for it. But actually there are consequences for it. It's going to take time for those consequences to play out. And we will be covering it here on Breakthrough News, which is why, Eugene, I want to remind people that they can help support Breakthrough News, an independent media project that is committed to bringing you news from movements around the world and the actual news taking place that doesn't toe the line of the war machine, but challenges it. You can help support Breakthrough News by going to patreon.com/breakthrough news and becoming a member for as little as $5 a month. Though you are not capped at $5, you can absolutely give more.
You could give 500,000. You could give 500 million.
Yes.
Actually, we will take it all.
There's no limit. Let's test it out. You know what? Let's test it out. Let's see if Patreon has a limit for how much you can give.
Yeah,
Go.
I think, that's someone test that. Someone please test that. Test how much money you can give to Patreon. I suspect that they also would want to have more money. But anyway, long story short, you're right. Patreon.com/breakthrough news. But of course, huge thanks to all our guests, as always. Big thanks to everybody who donated in the chat, as always. Big thanks to everyone who's watching, who's sharing, who's putting it out there, any possible way you can. We really, really appreciate you. That will do it for us here today on the Freedom Side. For myself, for Rania, we will see you next time.